Hi, I'm Rebecca Balcarcel, and I'd like to talk about a poem called The Lanyard. And this is by Billy Collins, who used to be the United States Poet Laureate and whose books are actually for sale in regular bookstores because he's such a rock star of a poet. So if you don't know Billy Collins, I'm happy you're going to be introduced to his work today. He is famous for humor, and all of his poems that I've read have some element of wry humor or an observation that makes you kind of smile. And then sometimes they're just laugh out loud funny too. And this is one of those. Like I said, all his poems tend to have this amusement in there somewhere. This is called The Lanyard, and it tells a little story. So I'll read it and then walk through the poem. So, The Lanyard. The other day I was ricocheting slowly off the blue walls of this room, moving as if underwater, from typewriter to piano, from bookshelf to an envelope lying on the floor, when I found myself in the L section of the dictionary, where my eyes fell upon the word lanyard. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly, a past where I sat at a workbench at a camp by a deep Adirondack lake, learning how to braid long, thin plastic strips into a lanyard, a gift for my mother. I had never seen anyone use a lanyard or wear one, if that's what you did with them, but that did not keep me from crossing strand over strand again and again until I had made a boxy red and white lanyard for my mother. She gave me life and milk from her breasts, and I gave her a lanyard. She nursed me in many a sick room, lifted spoons of medicine to my lips, laid cold face cloths on my forehead, and then led me out into the airy light and taught me to walk and swim. And I in turn presented her with a lanyard. Here are thousands of meals, she said, and here is clothing and a good education. And here is your lanyard, I replied, which I made with a little help from a counselor. Here is a breathing body and a beating heart, strong legs, bones and teeth, and 2 eyes to read the world, she whispered. And here, I said, is the lanyard I made at camp. And here, I wish to say to her now, is a smaller gift. Not the worn truth that you can never repay your mother, but the rueful admission that when I took the two-tone lanyard, when she took, the two-tone lanyard from my hand, I was sure as a boy could be that this useless, worthless thing I had wove out of boredom would be enough to make us even. Okay, so yes, the message actually is you can never repay your mother, but he does take it one step further in the end there and admit that he actually thought, because he's a boy, and in his naivete and his inexperience, he thought, well, here, a lanyard, now we're even. Okay, so obviously this poem is mostly a list of all the things that his mother did for him, or, a parent figure. Maybe in your life, doesn't have to be the mother, but for him it was the mother who did all these important parenting things. And, we weigh the enormity of that against this lanyard he made, which is this thing that goes around your neck and holds a name tag or something. That juxtaposition, that contrast, is where the humor comes from in the poem. Now, of course, he starts out in the present tense, not as a boy, but as a man. And it says, the other day I was, wandering here and there in my house, ricochet. That means bouncing from this to that. And he lists, he went from the typewriter to the piano to the bookshelf. And eventually he ends up at the dictionary, which tells you what kind of house he has. Like he has a dictionary laying somewhere. He's a poet. I guess that's probably why. And he sees the L's, and Lanyard is one of the words that he stumbles on. And this just poof sends him right back to the memory of camp and making this thing the lanyard. There's a line here that might be confusing. No cookie nibbled by a French novelist could send one into the past more suddenly. This is an allusion, and that means he's alluding to some other work of literature that the reader, we hope, is familiar with. I wasn't. I had to look it up. But he's referring to Marcel Proust, who is a French essayist novelist of maybe the last century or so. And in one of his books, the character nibbles a French cookie that's called a Madeleine. And this kicks off a whole bunch of memories for the character in the book. And the entire book is called A Remembrance. Gosh, I forgot the whole title, but that's what he's alluding to here. That is, Billy Collins is hoping that we know about Proust and this book and how nibbling a cookie could just poof, suddenly bring back a flood of memories. So this L word, lanyard, in the dictionary makes him think about camp. And I didn't go to camp as a kid, but I read about it and I've seen movies about it. And it sounds like he had a pretty typical overnight camp experience. It was, out in the great outdoors, and they made things and kept busy, So he made this gift for his mother. And he says that, being a boy of a pretty young age and not a lot of experience, he didn't even really know what a lanyard was. But, he just went ahead and made it because that was the project. The counselor's like, here's what we're doing today. And so he makes this boxy red and white lanyard for his mother. And here's where he starts the comparison. She gave me life, she gave me bones, she gave me eyes, good education, and all these things. And in return, he gives her the lanyard. And I love the particular details he decides to pick up on. Nursed me in many a sick room. Yeah, that's when you really miss a mother if you're sick, or a mother figure. Again, like could be grandmother, could be a father, but somebody who loves you, who takes care of you, especially when you're in that vulnerable situation of being ill. I remember the first time I was sick as a sort of grown up, the first time I lived on my own and I got sick and I was all alone. And I thought, oh, gosh, when I was a child, it wasn't like this. My mom brought me a bowl of soup or at least Kleenex or something. Anyway, I like that he chose that. That's a good one. And just all the happy things too. Led me out into the airy light, taught me to walk and swim. And again, the humor comes from comparing that to his little measly gift that he didn't even put that much effort into. He didn't even do it all alone. He had help from the counselor. Now, when we get to the end, he says, an adult again now. So we had the memory into the past. We come back to the present. And as a grown person, he says, Mom, I want to give you a gift again. So, but now it's a mature gift. The lanyard was his childhood gift. And, honestly, I'm a mother myself. I love those childhood gifts. Whether it's a Mother's Day card they made at preschool, it's so charming and so meaningful. It's fine, As a parent, you don't really expect to be repaid by your child. That's not really the deal, You're giving out of love, and hopefully, as parents, we're learning what love is by parenting, that it's selfless, that it involves sacrifice, and you don't do it to get repaid. It's not a transactional situation. It's real love, right? If it is, and I hope you had some kind of parent person who raised you, who gave you that kind of love, or that now you have that kind of love in your life. But when he looks back on it, he can see, the truth of it, which was mom made all kinds of gifts to me, all kinds of sacrifices, as she wanted to, right? I mean, and from the mother's side, this wasn't some terrible hardship. I mean, yes, there is hardship, but it's for such a good cause, right? You want to give yourself to raise your child, right? So this is voluntary. And you have no expectation that the child will ever really know, what all you did for them. And that's okay. Maybe when they become a parent, they start to get a sense of what a big thing it really is. But he does admit, as a grown person now, that he is confessing, really. It's a confession. When I was that boy, I actually thought this would make us even. Because yes, you can never repay your mother, and he mentions that. And he's probably, as a poet, that's smart to mention that. Because he's thinking, my reader is predicting that that's the theme of the poem, which it is. But the reader's predicting that he's going to stop after saying, the lesson here, the moral of the story is you can never repay your parent. But he does go on and he says, yes, that's true, but I thought we would be even because that's how naive I was, right? Which is fine. The mom didn't mind that, but it is funny. And here's where another little bit of humor, that a kid is that unaware of all the resources that are being poured onto them. The housing, the food, the emotional support. Yeah. So, of course, that's the way it is, right? And in the circle of life kind of thing, you, in your turn, grow up and have people in your life that you take care of. Like you go from being receiver to giver. And that's a really beautiful thing. So, yeah, this is one of my favorite poems. And I always share it with my students because they usually enjoy it and can relate to it too. So I hope you enjoyed it. And go find some more Billy Collins poems because I think you'll like them. And join me here for another video soon.